You do that. Figure it.
I don't have it, so I don't know.
know.
So whatever, we'll just roll with this today. It's fine. We'll just roll with this.
We're just gonna roll with it. So, Toni, welcome to Investor Party. So, let me explain to you who we are. You only see a small group of people, but Investor Party is a conglomerate, a mastermind of entrepreneurs and business owners. There is about 120, I think at this rate, 130 or so of us around the country. Okay, and it's also streaming on Facebook, so we have some viewers on Facebook as well. And what we do, we get together and we use our knowledge from financial investments in the financial markets as well as real estate in order to develop, of course, our portfolio and our wealth. But we also are very strong in giving back to the community. This is what really brought us together, was our whole mission in order to house people like at-risk youth, survivors of domestic violence, take our financial wealth, create that abundance mindset within people, and always give back to the community. And I'm so excited to have you, Toni. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to be here.
You and I have the same mentality when it comes to abundance, when it comes to the importance of financial education, when it comes to family planning, and really leveraging what we have in order to make a difference for the next generation.
Yes.
So, Toni, I wanted to give the floor to you. Introduce yourself, introduce what you do, who you focus on, and how you help.
Yeah, so my name is Toni Vaughn, and I started Young Adult Empowerment really based on my own rocky experience going through young adulthood. I actually graduated college near the height of the financial crisis of 2008, and I was not prepared. I thought that all I needed was a degree and that was going to be enough for me to get, gainfully employed, and that I would just kind of figure it all out as I went along. And what ended up happening was that, and I see it happening so much with other young people, is that they don't understand how crucial that first 10 years, that decade is, that foundational decade outside of transitioning from dependence or being in, someone else is helping take care of you to now you're completely on your own in terms of whose responsibility it is. So what I love about what I do is I help college graduates, I help even people who have not gone through college, anyone who has a passion for personal growth, or they understand the importance of, like you talked about, personal finance, mind mastery, a meaningful career. I like to call it career magic. They want to have rewarding relationships. They want to, make an impact, like you said, in their community. They understand the importance of the environment around them and who they surround themselves with, and the impact that can have on their life and their success and their happiness. So I feel very fortunate to do what I do. And, like you said, there's just a huge piece that is just missing. And I like to help be a bridge and help be a partner with young people, especially.
So you mentioned it really came out of your own personal journey, and welcome to the community. So many of us have that personal journey where the reason behind us here is because we either are overcoming, present tense, or overcame some life challenge, something. And we saw there's an opportunity for better quality of life should we partner together and really develop ourselves into a community and stuff. Because I'm going to talk a little bit more about your personal experience, how that formed your character, how it formed your career, your inspiration.
Yeah, so for me, then I like to use the, just my degree is in finance, so my brain just works that way. And when I started to really look at the numbers, being unemployed and underemployed for the first 2 years after college resulted in basically a $57,000 mistake for me. Mm-hmm. That's lost income that took place by getting a position 2 years after graduating that I could have and should have gotten right after graduating. There was no reason that I couldn't have and shouldn't have gotten that same role immediately following getting my degree. But there were so many missteps. It's like we always, we can Monday morning quarterback, or we can hindsight's 2020, but we look back and we think of all the missteps that were made, and it sure shapes our story. But I like to say, and I know there's a quote out there, and I'm going to totally butcher it, but I think it's being smart is learning from your own mistakes and being wise is learning from the mistakes of others. And
Mm,
so if you can look at someone else's, and that's why I felt so compelled to share my story, is because you do not have to have these missteps. You don't have to have, you don't have to make every mistake. Not every mistake is worth making, I can promise you. So you can learn from the mistakes of others and help it to, to grow and to develop and to really find out more about yourself and use that to grow. So for me, I graduated and I literally applied to dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of places. And I didn't get one interview until I got called by a financial, 100% commission only position. I was desperate. I had no other option. So I said, all right, fine, I'll go. And there were about 15 other poor, broke college students in this room that were all being sold on 100% commission financial sales.
mm-hmm.
I had nothing else going on. So I thought, you know what? All right, fine. I'll take my chances and I'll go for it. So the one reason that that really kind of tipped me in favor of doing it is that most you can't get your financial your Series 7 and 66 and things like that unless you're sponsored by a company. So that was the one catch. The company allowed you to study for the tests, and they would sponsor you for the test. They would pay for the test. That was the one thing that I thought, at the very least, if I pass these, I'll have a marketable skill, or I'll have something that will help me, that will look good on a resume if I have to end up going out and doing something else. So you can guess it, as a 21-year-old young person who has a degree in finance but has no experience managing assets for anyone else. When I reached out to people to say, hey, let me help you with your financial management, they weren't too excited about a 21-year-old that had no experience in the height of a financial crisis. So
Yeah.
a lot of things not really going for me. So now here's where I made a crucial mistake. I allowed that one situation to make me disengage from my plan. And so my original plan was, I love finance. I want to get a degree in my field. And so I completely switched gears. And at the moment, I kind of tricked myself into thinking, okay, I'm empowering myself. I'm going to become an entrepreneur. And I had a little bit of experience doing some fundraising for schools and athletics and things like that. So I started a fundraising business. Well, in 2009, I think I made a grand total of $2,000 at my entrepreneurial gig. So suffice it to say, it was a disaster. But one of the things that I talk to young people about is that, and this is, like I said, a crucial mistake I made, which was I forgot to engage in my community. I forgot to reach out to people who know me and who know that I'm going to be a good hire and all those wonderful things, the community and the networking. And so eventually I wised up and I started to reach out to some people, and I was so fortunate to get hired with T. Rowe Price, and this would have been in 2010. And so, and then I started there, and then I kind of launched my career. And then, of course, it's made several different pivots since there. But, like I said, that's that $57,000 mistake, is that what I ended up making from various different, side jobs and entrepreneurial gigs, the job that I got hired at T. Rowe Price, I could have and should have gotten after my degree. So there's no reason that couldn't have happened. So that's a little bit more about my journey.
So it's, you and I have the same heart. We love working with young people. I know for me, sometimes it gets a little bit challenging because they look at this person who, I'm 39 years old, next year I'll be turning 40. And sometimes, even though they know that I have the best of intentions for them, they always look at this old guy. What is he going to teach me about finances? Do I really trust him? I don't know him. Do you experience that? And how do you overcome relating to a generation that's not you?
Yeah. So I think that, honestly, and I think it's just my style is I love self-deprecating humor. I really do.
Same.
I allow people to make fun of me, like I'll say, I'll hold up the phone and say, does this thing flip open or whatever, you
Yeah.
let them know that, hey, look, although I may not have the exact experiences that you have, there are common threads. And so
Uh-huh.
if you can start to relate to young people with humor, I find that it's just incredibly disarming. And anyone who might have a little bit of a resistance, that's why one of the things, and I should say also, when I became a supervisor at T. Rowe Price, before I ended up leaving there, it was the most powerful lesson I learned as a new leader was that the first interactions I had with anyone on my team were all personal. It was nothing, I didn't even talk about performance or their past year's performance or the expectations of their role. None of it. It was 100% personal. So that lays the groundwork for building a strong relationship. So, and I'm sure we've all heard that stories are how our brains are wired. It's what allows us to connect with people. So, the stories might have different elements where, like we're talking about, maybe, we didn't have a cell phone or whatever,
Yeah.
but at the same time, the struggle's the same, the
Okay.
challenges are the same, the pull between you want to be connected to your parents and to your family, but at the same time, you want to be completely on your own. All of that is the same. So just sharing that commonality, I feel like, I like to say relatability builds credibility. So if you can, just show where you can relate to their situation, anytime, and this is just another lesson that I learned is that anytime that you try to come too heavy with advice or guidance before that relationship has been built, that connection has been built, you're going to really struggle to have any type of influence or help them improve their behavior in any way.
That's a nice segue to my next question that I wanted to ask you is there are nowadays, since many of us haven't been an undergraduate for a while,
Yeah.
are there similarities and are there differences? Because that was one of my biggest concerns. Some people say like, oh, the millennials and Gen Z and all, the next generation, they're, insert some negative characteristic there, whatever. But
Yeah.
you're saying that deep down inside, their finances, their concerns, their EQ, we've been there. So
Yeah.
there's more similarities than there are differences, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I actually think that that's not as hard of a bridge to make, especially now because of what we're going through with the pandemic
Mhm.
and COVID, because I I have a handful of students who had internships and the internships went away.
Oh,
And
that's right.
so for me personally, I can say I know exactly what you're going through because before the financial crisis hit, there was no problem for people in the finance field to get a degree. And I will say that most of the students that I've worked with are business students. So
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of commonality, but even if it wasn't a business student, and I definitely have a few other young people that I've worked with recently that, two young men that I'm working with right now have no college, well, I should say have no degree. They have some college experience, but no degree. And so they're struggling. And that's another reason, like, something that I was participating in this morning was talking to my local community, because as you know, I care so deeply about young people and these restricted actions with the businesses
Mm.
I feel like are really based on old numbers. And we have just seen that suicides and domestic violence, substance abuse, all of these things are disproportionately hurting people that can afford it the least. And a lot
Mm.
of those are young people. And so I feel like, once again, that's a way that you can relate to people is the struggle.
Mm.
Because, I can say without, with tremendous credibility, I was depressed. I mean, could you imagine being unemployed and underemployed for 2 years? And we know that anxiety and depression are huge issues for young people
Mhm.
today. And the last 7 months has only made it worse. So now, fortunately, I do think things are starting to look up a little bit for college graduates, but it's still a fresh wound for them. So they still understand that, you know, they don't have to go it alone. They can, you know, and the other thing too that I will say is another way to build credibility with young people and bridging that age gap is basically, you know, standing strong on where you have confidence, but then being vulnerable where you don't. You know, like, I mean, I tell people all the time, you know, oh my gosh, if you can't find a job, do you want to be my social media manager? Because I can't figure out all this stuff with, you know, Instagram and all that. And, you know, and they laugh and they love it because they're like, oh my gosh, how old is this lady?
Don't talk to us about TikTok, kids, okay? Because none of us understand it.
Exactly. So, no, exactly. So it's like, you know, if I can basically, you know, ask them questions about, you know, where do you have a lot of confidence, or where, you know, where do you, what are you struggling with that maybe is unique to your situation? Like, you know, telling them, hey, I grew up with bullying, you know, it's always been around, but now you guys you poor kids have it 24/7. You can't escape. If that phone is near you, bing, 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 and you're getting, you know, all these alerts, and then you got kids that are just horrific and horrifying, particularly for young girls. And it's just unrelenting. So any way that you can stand firm, here's where I have a lot of experience, but then ask them to be, you know, highlight where they are an expert in their own life and their generation, and showing that you're willing to learn from them. You know, it's like the teacher becomes the student. It's just another really powerful way to connect.
I really love that. And I really appreciate that also, because I remember being in my 20s, and I got my MBA, but it was, I also foreclosed on my condo. I mean, I lost it. So, and I filed bankruptcy. And I love that you pointed it out, because I was still in that mindset. I couldn't separate my emotions from money. Those are two different mindsets. And I didn't understand the relationship between the two. So the energy that I put into it, I too fell into the depression and the anxiety. I had no mentor. I had no guide, no one to explain to me, hey, there's a separation and let's focus on the good, that there is good that's going to be coming out of this. No one was guiding me. I had to go through that the hard way. So the difference that you make with the younger generation, who honestly, who feel the same exact emotions, you're giving a service that was not available to many.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, you also work with families, not just that individual person, but you also work with families. Can you talk about how you help a family?
Yeah, so I think that what's really important about that is that, once again, knowing that the choices that you make, and a lot of what I do too is talking to young people before they get married, and being thoughtful about, okay, so you've got a plan for your finances and for your career, but how have you ran that past your significant other, and who you plan to build a future and a life with? Because as we all know, that can dramatically impact how we choose to navigate the next 5 to 10 years, when we're just kind of figuring it out, and if there's no planning around that. So one of the tools that I help walk young people through, particularly about how they start to, you know, come together with their finances, is you have to be willing, you have to first know and get clarity around what's important to you. What are your goals? And the more clarity that you can create for yourself makes it easier for you to communicate to the person that that you want to build a relationship with. Because as we know, finances, you know, invariably become a big portion of either continuity or contention. So we want to really be thinking ahead of how, you know, what's important to me, what's important to them, what can we live with, what can we maybe not live with, and where do we go from here? And then the other thing that I think is so important is the messaging with children around money. And
Let's talk about that. So what are some of the common messages that are being said, and what do you recommend? Are they aligned?
Yeah, so what we have found is that not enough boomer parents And it's a little bit less prevalent with Gen Xers, but they did not talk with their children about money. And one of the ways that I have spent a lot of time talking and thinking about this is the work that I've done with high net worth individuals that have children who have every opportunity, but they're not making the most of the opportunities that they have. And what a common theme is that parents did not talk to them about money. They just didn't. They just assumed, I've done my part as the parent. I've worked hard. Maybe I'm a business owner, and they have visions of their children taking over businesses for them, but they don't include children in the process. And now it's like a loop. It's like a cycle, and it feeds into the lack of confidence that young people have around money and around adulthood in general. So one thing that I talk frequently about, no matter how old your children, is, if you have not already started to talk to them about money, start now. And you don't have to overwhelm them. You don't have to talk about everything, but even just principles, the principles of why we do what we do. I talk a lot about messaging. So rather than telling a child, maybe money's tight right now, if you're a young family and you can't afford something, don't tell your children you can't afford it. Tell your children, we make choices. And right now we're choosing to save our money. Don't say we can't afford it. Don't make them feel bad about asking something, because what you're imprinting on them will last forever. I mean, it really, unless they consciously make an effort, and it's very challenging to do, your financial blueprint, your money map, basically, will become a part of who you are. So be very careful and think strategically before you have children, or before they, get to be of the age where, you'll start talking to them about some of these things. Be very thoughtful about what the messaging will be. If they ask for something and you can't afford it, that's the reality. But the message you want them to know is that we're making a choice. We have we make money. And then right now what we're doing is we're setting aside 15% or 20% or whatever your financial goals are, and you include them in the process. Okay, why? And another key messaging technique that I've used with my own children that really works is that, and it's hard, the first time they may not get it, but after you say it a few times, they start to really understand. And I say, my job as your mom is to not only consider, 7-year-old Victoria, but 15-year-old Victoria and 21-year-old Victoria. And so it's hard sometimes, but what you're teaching them is, like, as we know from, human behavior and psychology, is the marshmallow, study, where, if you give a child one marshmallow right now, or you tell them that they can have 2 marshmallows in 15 minutes, what will they choose? Well, we want to teach them delayed gratification. And one way that you can talk to them about that is you start to brainstorm and you start to ask your child, now, what could you think that 15-year-old Victoria might really like? Do you think she might be wanting a car? Ooh, do you think maybe she's thinking about wanting to go, leave mom and dad and have some freedom and be able to live on her own? So you start to role play and think about how, if you save your money, and then of course, as they get older, you can talk to them about effective investment techniques to grow the money. But the first step is always to save. And so you can split up piggy banks. With my children, we have 2 separate piggy banks. One is for saving, which we never touch. And one is for, if we decide we come across something that would be valuable that they might really like, then, hey, we'll see if you have enough money. And, we obviously help them make sure that they don't empty it out, but just teaching them and including them is far better than setting up 2 bank accounts for them that they don't even know about. And that's what we were finding, is that many, many young children were the beneficiaries of great financial choices. But then here's a crazy statistic. Within 3 generations, 90% of inherited wealth is gone.
God, just
because they were never included in the process and they had no vested interest in earning or managing the assets. So basically, your parents pass away, something was given to them, now it has fallen to you, and you have not been equipped or empowered with basic financial management. It's just like lottery winners. Right? The vast majority of the time, because they were never taught a strong foundation of financial management. So, it's like, for instance, another great tool that I like to tell, especially of middle schoolers and teenagers.
Okay.
Give the child free reign over how the money is spent for 1 month. You give them almost no guidance. You say, okay, mommy makes $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000, whatever it is, and here are some of the bills. How are you going to spend it? Give them opportunities. It's like I always say when it comes to interviewing, if you want to be a good hitter, you need more at bats.
Yeah.
If you want to be a good interviewer, you need more interviews. If you want to become good at financial management, you need to roll up your sleeves, and you need to be responsible for making choices. The more choices you make, the better you get at making choices. So that's just another really great tool. But the more you can include children, even at a young age, even if they're 3 or 4 years old, and you start to include them in some of these conversations, you have M&Ms or you have pretzels on the table, and you say, okay, we only have 10 pretzels this month, and how are we going to spend it? Okay, well, let's say 3 is what it takes for us to keep the roof over our head, and 2 is what it's going to take for our groceries. And then you just walk it through with them. And then when it gets down to like the last 2 or 3, you're like, well, what do we do now? Because now we got to pay for the water, and we got to pay for the lights. And so anything that you can do to get those wheels starting to turn will start to build that strong foundation.
Parents, you guys are taking notes. Like that's actually really innovative. So while we're on the topic of family, so Toni, my nieces and nephews are going to be graduating college in December as well as May. There's going to be a lot of people who are graduating into an economy where the unemployment rate is still pretty high. So let's pretend I am 20 or 21 years old. I'm, $60,000 in student loans, in student loan debt, and I need to find a job. Toni, can you help me? Should I hire a financial planner? What do I do? My anxiety is through the roof.
Yes.
What would you say?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first step that I would say, especially if I'm just talking, ideally, we'd be having this conversation earlier on, maybe after the first of the year, their last semester. But if we're just, here it is, it's May, diploma in hand, what do I do?
Yeah.
Honestly, I would say you have to reach out to your existing network. It really is the number one thing. And
Really?
I say that for 2 reasons.
Yeah.
One, 80% of jobs filled today, listed and unlisted. So a lot of times positions are not even listed. The people are placed there because they knew somebody. 80%. So networking is by and far and away, especially for new graduates, because let's face it, you're competing with people who probably have a lot more experience, and your resume is just not going to look as good as someone that has more direct, relevant experience. What strength you do have, though, is if you've been a good student, if you've had a part-time job, and maybe that boss might know somebody. And so you can, continue to build your network on LinkedIn, look at your phone, and seriously go down the contacts, contact by contact by contact. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your parents. And your parents might have friends who have, older children that are hiring with the company. But just the more you can have those conversations and letting people know what you're interested in, you're going to be so much more effective at finding a job. And the second reason that I say networking is important is kind of more of an indirect reason. It can be the loneliest place in the world. Being in front of your computer and you're just pounding away at your resume and you're alone. I mean, you've got 4 walls, you got nobody to talk to, and all you're communicating with is a computer and an application. And you know what we hear all the time? You get ghosted by recruiters. Some recruiters are great, some have no follow-up, and it can be incredibly, demoralizing. And so network with people, because first you're going to find that you are not alone. There are so many of your friends, and don't compare yourself. Just because Susie down the street got a job doesn't mean that that there's something wrong with you. Some people, then, hey, right place, right time, it just worked out for them. But you have to be resilient and know and trust that it is going to happen for you. And having the conversations with other people who are having a similar experience, really, it helps. It just helps. It really does.
Now, from your experience, do young people network? Do they do that?
If they work with me, they do.
I love that you are highlighting. Love that you're highlighting the value of network, because the young people who I mentor, obviously found me through networking, right? But if I just meet a young person, let's say my niece's friends or anything, they're still on their phone and they don't see the value of relationships. The relationships are next currency.
The first thing that I task them with doing is saying, you need to set up at least 2 informational interviews.
Love that.
No pressure at all. And that I think students like, because what they don't understand is that they really are being interviewed, but the pressure is off. The pressure is off. They don't have to agonize over, oh, what if they ask me this? What if they ask me that? And it just gives them more experience. And hey, guess what? If somebody does have an opening and they like you, you might be offered a job and you didn't even have to formally, apply an interview. So, I really task them just to start. You can find 2 people that you can conduct an informational interview with. And if you can't, if the student has demonstrated to me that they follow up with their communications, they don't drop the ball and you never hear from them again. If they're a responsible person, they take the coaching that we've worked on, and they seem, because I can't just, I'll be honest, I've made the mistake. I've been really enthusiastic about a young person, and I've had them set up with a professional partner that I have, and they didn't meet. They kind of just dropped the ball, and it makes me look bad. So I have to be very careful about who I put in front of my network. But if they have demonstrated that they are committed, they're consistent, they implement, then if they're really struggling, if they said, look, here, I've reached out to 5 people and nobody can do one, then I'll help. I'll step in and I'll, because they're showing the initiative. So informational interviews are great. And then the other thing too is I specifically task them with reaching out and getting, depending on where they start. Most students start with maybe only a handful or a dozen of communications on LinkedIn. Social media is not foreign to them. And I feel like you've got some really low-hanging fruit with LinkedIn. Your professors, your neighbors, your high school teachers, if that you can start to just find people, and then LinkedIn will give you recommendations. If you've had a part-time job, it might start to, so-and-so worked here as well too, and maybe you've worked with them. So just you start to build those connections, and then it's like a snowball. You just really, and I try to, I encourage them to get up to 500 as quickly as they can. And that's tactical. It's easy to see. Are you doing the work? Are you reaching out? And then and then we start to talk about DMing, potential recruiters, or maybe people like that work for a company that you really want to work for. And we start to talk about some of those conversations that you can do there. So no, networking is really, really crucial.
When, so I know for me, we're going to now segue into, you mentioned that eventually start talking about investments. I know for me, other than having a 401k because I just knew it was good.
Yeah.
Yes, I didn't know. Yeah. That was my one form of investment when in the majority of my 20s. So I didn't really start diving into financial markets or real estate or universal life insurance or any other vehicle until about my mid 30s. Okay. So from your experience and your recommendations, under what conditions and at what age is it appropriate to bring up the topic of investing?
So the funny thing is that I actually have found that especially young people who start to make a good salary, they actually, for the most part, are starting to have more interest. Not everybody. I know some people are just not interested at all. But if they see that they are accumulating a lot of extra money, they have the normal, natural sense of, I should be doing something with this.
Okay.
And so And that's just what I have found. Like I said, there are some people who want nothing to do with it. They're like, I don't care. At least if it's in the bank, I know where it is. I don't want to risk it on anything. But the internet, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, and I'm sure you've probably seen this too, but the internet has empowered some young people. You've seen Robinhood and some other, financial, self-directed financial initiatives that, you know, I don't know. My husband is a certified financial planner. So I believe very deeply in finding a qualified financial advisor. And I'll be the first to admit, there are a lot of horrible financial advisors out there. So you really do have to be diligent and make sure that you're working with somebody that, has no proprietary products, because they're gonna, it's hard to know if they're ever really helping you with what's what's in your best interest. So then the conversation starts to look like, what is suitability versus fiduciary? Who's really going to be acting in your best interest, or is it just to basically get around financial, compliance to say that it was suitable? So, you just want to make sure that that if you start to get into investing, that there are a few things that you want to start to consider. And so and some people are very overwhelmed with that, like I had a young lady who really organized. I was so impressed when she brought me some of her, and she had a budget. It was all in Excel.
Nice.
I mean, she even had separate bank accounts for travel. Was really important to her. So she wanted to make sure that she had sectioned off a completely separate bank account for travel. But then even though this was what was so shocking to me, even though she had a degree in business, the lack of investment acumen and long-term financial planning was really surprising to me. Now, she was totally organized. She was in a great place. I was able to help her very easily. But I could see the eyes glossing over when we started talking about IRAs and Roths and all that kind of stuff.
It's not the most interesting of topics.
It's not. It's not. I think it's just like anything else, having a better understanding of why you're saving, why you're investing. And and that this is just my personal opinion, but something that I talk to a lot of young people about is that the linear, get hired, work for 30 years, retire doesn't work for everybody. And it
doesn't.
So the more that you can help them walk through what their goals are, what's important to them, what does financial independence and financial abundance mean in their life, and you start to think about some of those emotional needs that are unspoken and that are unstated. And the more that you can get them to think about the life that they want to create for themselves, less financial stress, less strain in their relationships, the ability to, have the travel or the baseball card collection or whatever it is that's important to them. But the more that you can tie the financial goals to their emotional needs, and what a fulfilling and joyful life looks like, you're going to have an easier time talking to them about the investment piece.
And when we talk about goals, and this really resonated with some of the people who I mentor also, we go have a similar discussion of where do you see yourself at about 5 or 10 years? And it could be anything. And I love that people have goals of travel and maybe have a family, but I've always picked up that more often than not, they want to give back. They want something, make a contribution to society. So I'm working with someone, she wants to, I'm a personal trainer, so she wants to uplift women in the world of fitness. I met another person who really cares deeply about the geriatric community, but they don't know how to self-actualize. They don't know how to do that, but they know in their heart that they want to incorporate that in some of their business. So when it comes to contribution and philanthropy, how do you advise?
Yeah, so the first thing that I obviously advocate for is, if you have a budget and you're saving, set the money aside. And believe me, once you get in front of the right people, there are plenty of people that I'm sure will be happy to help you find where you can invest your charitable giving. So, but for young people who, like for instance, there's a local person here who that's exactly what she does. Now she does it on a much bigger scale, but for me, she's a tremendous resource because that's
Mhm.
exactly what she does is charitable giving and how she helps people who want to give back.
Mhm.
And let's be honest, there can also be some tax benefits to, and just I just want to kind of address that real quick because I think sometimes people think, oh yeah, they're only doing it because of tax benefits. Well, I'll be honest, for me personally, I I know what I care about and I know who I want to help. And
Mhm.
so would I rather have more ownership and I feel a stronger sense of community and contribution if I can save myself some taxes and then direct those funds in a more meaningful way to what's important to me. So
Mhm.
I just wanted to say that real quick because I think sometimes people get a bad, there's a bad reaction when we talk about saving money in taxes and oh, you're only doing charitable because you want to save money. I
Yeah.
don't. I find that for me, the majority of people, that's not their main intent. Their main
Yeah.
intent, they care deeply about what they're doing, and that especially in the case for young people, it's like as you get older, you too often you're forced to narrow your path, and that's hard for young people. I think that a lot of young people would love to have two or three different jobs,
Mhm.
where they're saving the whales or sea turtles, or,
Mhm.
they want to plant trees, or they want to, like you said, help underprivileged youth, or they want to help people who have been the victim of, poverty or hunger or whatever,
Mhm.
whatever speaks to them, they want to have even a small piece to that.
Yeah.
So I would once again just really look out to people in your local community because that person is going to be far more likely to answer the phone. I'm almost positive they're going to have a phone number on their website. And yeah, you just look for someone in your city that helps with charitable giving. And
Mhm.
you will find list upon list of people who have organizations within your local community. And maybe it's not even local, maybe it's a bigger organization, but it's what they do every day. And
Mhm.
so that they are far more knowledgeable than I am. So I try to leverage the people that I know work with it more closely.
Any success stories
For young people,
for young people? Any examples of it's like, oh, you got to work with Toni. She's the best. This is how she helped me, and I went from point A to point Z.
well, the one that really speaks to my heart right now because it happened during, COVID. And
Mhm.
she's actually a young woman in South Africa, and she has a young baby with special needs. And she she was applying and applying and applying and just not having any luck at all. And we were able to revamp her resume and do some interview prep.
Mhm.
And what I noticed more than anything was that it was just a few adjustments and it was so doable. And so, but so like in a way, I almost felt like, gosh, I'm not sure I'm really helping that much. But it led to a position within just a few months. She was actually hired and doing the role within a few months during COVID. And that was a really big win for me. I felt really good about that because she was just so appreciative and she just said, I really was on the brink of just stopping my career search. And the reason that that speaks to me is because, as I said at the beginning, is that was me. I mean, that was me. Had someone been there to step in those few days after I had had some of those crushing defeats, literally could have changed the trajectory of those next few years. So that's a really special one for me.
Aw, I love that. And you're
Uh,
such a great coach. You're such a great mentor. I know for me, it would have made the difference when, I mean, background story about me. So I graduated my undergraduate right around the dot-com bubble. And then I got my master's degree right around the beginning of the real estate crash. And so,
yeah,
I mean, if anyone who's resilient about recessions, it's probably me.
yeah,
So, but all those times I was alone. I never had a mentor. I never had, maybe or maybe not, I had like someone who worked in the financial planning capacity. and only looked at the numbers, but I never had a mentor. I never had a guide. And you provide this incredible service for young people because you actually get it. You actually understand the journey, and you can speak very well about not only the hard skills, but also the soft skills of just growing up. I mean, it is tough. It is pretty tough.
And it gets easier. So
Yeah.
it does. It gets easier. It's, the hardest is what you're going through right now. And if you can just keep moving forward, it gets easier.
So what advice do you have for us? A lot of us are 35 or older. Okay. How do we make a difference for the next generation? How can we be better contributors to society and assist the next generation of entrepreneurs and investors?
Yeah, so I mean, like something that is very near and dear to my heart is the time that I gift my time by being a mentor at the local college, and then even at the high schools, and reaching out to guidance counselors and basically picking up where they have to leave off because they're probably overworked. They have way too many students to effectively manage, or they haven't maybe worked out an effective strategy to really engage with those students on some of those softer skills and meaningful the lifestyle piece, the financial abundance piece, which a lot of guidance counselors, it's not really on their radar. It's like, how many college applications have you put in? So it's a little more rigid, and that's what we pick up and and be a little bit more specialized and really get to know these young people. So that's a great way to do it too. And then I would just say continuing to build relationships. Like, I'll be honest, something that I have even thought about doing during this time right now is that I just want to take kids on a hike. I want everybody to meet me at, there's a local place here. It's a perfect little 20-minute hike. And at the end, we just talk. What are you going through? What are you struggling with? And just providing that community and that opportunity for them to see that they're not alone. So just getting the word out that you're a resource, and that, like I said, I just had such success with some of the non-formal interactions. So like, if you can take a walk, or if you can go do something fun that allows them to kind of be themselves, and they don't have to be so concerned with how they are appearing and how, I have to sit and I have to dress a certain way and I have to sit on the opposite side of the table. Let's just go hang out. Let's go shoot hoops or whatever. I'm hoping, I know that in some places we can't do that, but if we do get a chance to get out and go for a hike or do something that, maybe we have the opportunity to build that relationship and that connection.
I forgot to tell you, and I forgot to tell the investor party. So tonight, as you were talking about universities, I actually was invited as a guest speaker for Chico State University tonight at 7:00 Pacific Standard. But their student body wants me to talk to them about the cash flow quadrant. And they're like, hey, there's this personal trainer turned entrepreneur turned investor and stuff. He kind of has an interesting story. We met through LinkedIn, actually. She reached out to me and she asked me for help. And she said, would you be interested in guest speaking? And I said, sure.
Absolutely. And that's how it goes.
Yeah, it warmed my heart that like, one, young people like me.
Yeah.
Two, I actually have something good to say. Yeah, it was like, oh, I'm cool. Thank you. Thank you for that reassurance. But it makes a huge difference because it really said, kind of like, it really centered me that young people, they generally want to learn. They generally want to live a better life. And they sometimes just don't know who to go to, where to reach out. So they're going to take the best forward. It's like, can you help me? Like,
yeah,
of course I can. Of course.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that, like, we can't help everyone. We can't help. There are some young people who are they are going to learn from the school of hard knocks, and they are going to have to, like we were talking about earlier, they're going to have to make some big mistakes for them to really understand that they're going to have to make some adjustments. But there's a substantial amount of young people who are just thirsting for guidance.
Yeah.
Those are who we can start with until we maybe can positively peer pressure the other people to see, hey, this is fun. This This foundational decade of your life can literally be the difference between a life full of struggle and a
Mhm.
life full of abundance and joy, because we know that there is such a thing as wage scarring. And if you get caught in a trap of constantly moving from job to job, and there's aimlessness and there's no clear direction, you're not focused on skill building and saving and all of those life skills that are and financial skills that are so important. There is such a thing as wage scarring that will keep you from it'll be much more difficult. Nothing's impossible, but it'll be you're digging yourself a hole that becomes nearly impossible to get out of the longer in life. Once you have kids, once you have
Mhm.
full-time work, once you're tired,
Mhm.
once you maybe have health problems, it only gets more challenging. Now is the time. So
And I love that. Is it reaching out to people and making a contribution? It really hits home. It's like as an individual person, I'm like, this is so much bigger than me. This is so much bigger than just giving back. It's purpose. And it's actually
mhm,
setting an example of like, hey, together we can actually make a difference and help an entire generation. It's pretty awesome.
exactly.
Just one person at a time. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Well, Toni, if any of our viewers or any of our members want to get in touch with you, or even any young person, hopefully they're watching on my Facebook, if
Yes.
anyone wants to get in touch with you, how do they reach out to you?
Well, the best website is just ToniMiloVaughn.com or YoungAdultEmpowerment.com. It goes to the same place, whichever's easier to remember. And then, of course, LinkedIn is a great place to reach out for me. I'm pretty much on any of the main social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. But LinkedIn is where I spend a lot of my time. Because like I said, it's just a natural way for me to meet those who are interested in the guidance that they can benefit so much from. So those are the best places.
Awesome. Well, Toni, thank you so much for your time, your mentorship, your guidance, your knowledge is
Thank
incredible
you.
value. Welcome to Investor Party. You are officially part of the family. We're not letting go of you. Thank you so much. And
Well,
I thank
thank
you
you for
guys.
having me.
Yes,
Oh, I
thank you
love it.
guys
I love
for
it so
attending. So everyone have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful day. See you on the next party. See you guys.
much. Bye bye.